Okay, the next lesson is on VLOOKUp. VLOOKUP is one of my favorite functions in Excel. Really has a lot of powerful capabilities, and it's something that's used pretty commonly in the workplace, although maybe not understood to its fullest potential. So let's go ahead and jump right in and take a look at what VLOOKUP, and then we're going to follow that up with what HLOOKUP can do for you in Excel. So if you take a look at the worksheet that is provided for you online, you'll see that we have two tabs. We have VLOOKUP and we have HLOOKUP. Okay, so the two lookup functions that we're going to work with. Well, here's what we have. Here's our scenario. I'm going to use that shortcut. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit here so this is a little bit easier for you to see. Here's what we're looking at here. We are looking at creating a data table or a little chart that looks at how many days delinquent someone's bill is and then provides the course of action according to that. So if you look at column C, we'll notice that we have 35 days delinquent on the first account, 42 days delinquent on the second, and so on, going from account number 1 to account number 10. If you look up in your instruction box up here, we see a little bit of a rubric here. We see that if you are less than 30 days late, then we have no action. If you are 31 to 60 days late, well, then we have a phone warning. If you're 61 to 90 days late, and we've got a close account notification. 91 to 120 days, we are at legal action notice, and anything over 120 is referred to attorney, and that's bad news. We don't want to have that happen. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a lookup function, specifically VLOOKUP, to evaluate how many days delinquent the customer is, and then based on a rubric that we're going to have to actually set up here, not as a text box, we are then going to have it evaluate, reference, and then give us the action that we're going to use. So we're going to do that using VLOOKUP. Well, the first thing you need to know about VLOOKUP is that it's a function that requires a little bit of pre-work, a little bit of setup. You can't just type it out like you would a sum function or a min or a max or really any of the basic aggregate functions. So what we're going to want to do is we actually have to set up a lookup table, an actual rubric, which is really just transferring what you see in this text box here to an actual table that works in Excel. Because we know that Excel doesn't deal with words very well. It can do things with words. It does have text capabilities, and it doesn't really deal well with pulling information from a text box and then filling that information out and actually having it perform an action. So we're going to do some setup work. I'm going to go ahead and do it. And as I do it, I'm going to explain to you some rules that go a little bit along with VLOOKUP and other lookup functions in Excel. Okay. So first of all, we know that anything that is less than 30 days is considered a no action item. Okay. Anyone that's between 31 and 60 days, we consider that, well, that's a phone warning. It's never the greatest typer. Okay. Anyone between 61 and 90 days is going to be a close account. Okay. Anyone between 91 and 120 is going to be a legal action notice. Okay. And anything that's over 120 days, we are going to consider that a refer to attorney, and that is bad news. We don't want that to happen, but it looks like we've got two people in our account that do. So we've done a little bit of preset up here. We've got a little rubric here. We've got a little lookup table that we're going to use to assess this information. Now, what would a normal person do? What would a person that's kind of a novice to Excel do? Well, here's what they do. They'd go over, they go, hey, 35 days. Okay, well, it's higher than 31, less than 61. That's a phone warning. And what are they going to do? They're going to just type out phone warning. Well, I'll tell you, that's not very efficient. And if there were, say, 1,000 accounts instead of 10 accounts, well, this would be your entire day, probably your entire week, just going through and filling this out. Now, factor in that you just don't want to do it. It's monotonous work. And mental fatigue will lead to errors. There's got to be a better way to do it. And that's what VLOOKUP can do for you. So let's go ahead and jump in with VLOOKUP. I'll show you the syntax for how VLOOKUP works, and from there we will then jump in and make this thing happen. So I'm going to go ahead and start by typing VLOOKUP. As we know, when we write functions in Excel, we have to open up with the equals key, followed by the name of the function. And let me backtrack because I did it pretty quickly. I started typing VLOOKUP, and instead of just finishing that out, if I hit tab, it automatically started writing that function for me. Now I've got this little box here that's helping me out. It's telling me the syntax that I need to complete a VLOOKUP. It's asking me for the lookup value. It's asking me for the table array, the column index number, and the range lookup, which we're going to talk about. So let's go ahead and jump right into VLOOKUP with the lookup value. Well, the lookup value is pretty easy. That's going to be the actual amount that they are delinquent, if they're delinquent at all. So that's going to be whatever's showing up in column C. So I'm going to go and plug that in, and then I'm going to hit comma to advance to the next variable of this particular function, which is the table data array. Now, I had to go through and set this up, and in the real world, you know, it's unfortunate, but you probably won't have this data array. So you will have to set this up when you go through and create the VLOOKUP. Now I've gone ahead and done that. Now I'm going to go ahead and select that, and it's very important to know that I selected it with no column headings. So credit auction table or action table, that was not selected. It's just going to be here and here. Okay. Now I want to use the fill handle. And the fill handle is going to allow me to copy this function down without having to retype it over and over again. So when you use the fill handle, what it does is that it adds 1 to every relative reference. So C17 would become C18 in the next function down, which is good. However, this data set, this 0 through this refer to attorney, so that cells G17 through H22, well, those are constants, and we don't want those constants to change. So in order to lock those in, we're going to hit F4 on our keyboard, and that's going to make those absolute references. That's going to lock that data table in, so even when we use the fill handle, it's not going to change. That is very, very important. Okay, the next thing it's going to ask for is the column index number. Now, the answer to this is 2, but I'm glad it came up because what we need to stop and do is talk about the rules of VLOOKUP, really the lookup functions in general, okay? So here they are. The lookup functions actually have quite a few things that you have to just understand or know in order to make them work. Okay, so I did these kind of as a second nature, but I didn't really explain what I did. And it starts with the table itself. The lookup, or the actual data matching portion of VLOOKUP table, or the lookup table I created, has to be in the far leftmost column. Column number 1 has to be the matching column, meaning that when Excel takes the number that you're evaluating, the lookup value, those lookup values have to be in the first column of your data table, okay? And as they are. Got to take it a step farther, though. They also have to be in ascending order, okay? So when you get an elevator in the basement floor, you're going from the 0 floor, the level 1 basement, you go up. So they need to go in ascending order, and that's what we have here, starting at 0, being the lowest low number possible, going all the way up to 121 and beyond, which is referred to attorney, which is the highest possible action. Okay, the second column or the third or the fourth or the fifth columns in your data table can be anything you want. Those are just the return values. Now in this case, the return value or the actual data that you want to be displayed is in the second column of the table, right? Because the lookup value always has to be in the first. And in this case, there's only two columns in the table, so you really have no choice but to make it 2. Okay, remember those rules. Those are very important. Remember, numbers must go in ascending order. Lookup value must be on the left-hand side. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is the last variable of range lookup. And you have the option of approximate or exact, true or false. Okay, well, let me tell you what those do. Now, our answer to this one is approximate, but let's explain what exact does as well. So I'm going to go ahead and choose approximate. I'm going to close it off. I get a phone warning. Life's good. I'm going to go ahead and fill this down, and everything's worked out exactly the way we wanted it to. So things are looking pretty good. So what's the difference between approximate and exact? Well, it's the same thing that you would do in your head, but Excel's not as smart as you are. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, let's look at that first number of 35. Okay, 35 is higher than 31, so we know that they have at least a phone warning, but it's less than 61, so we're not going to close their account. Now, you know that you got to do something. So what we do is it's kind of like a yo-yo. We go, well, 35 is higher than 0, it's higher than 31, but it's not higher than 61. So you know what we're going to do? We're going to roll back to phone warning, to the approximate number. That's what it did. If we had this set to exact, so I'm going to go in and make that change. Okay, if we change this to exact, When I put in exact, it went from giving me a phone warning to giving me NA, not applicable. Well, it's not applicable because it's looking for an exact match, and there is no 35 in the lookup column of our data table, so that doesn't work. Now, a couple things that you do need to know about this, though, is you need to know that if you want to work with words, and we know Excel doesn't really work with words well, but Excel can match, then you can actually do a VLOOKUP with words to something else. However, you need to make sure that it's always set to exact for the range lookup versus true, which is approximate. All right, so if we have it set to true, well, that's approximate. False is exact. We want to make sure that it's set exactly based on what we're looking up. So if it's approximate match, then that's the only way you're going to be able to do something like what we have here, where they're not matching up exactly. And if it's based on names, the only way that's going to work is if you have it set on exact, because it just doesn't know how to do that. Okay, so that being said, we're going to go ahead and leave this as approximate. We're going to close this off. And there you have VLOOKUP. Next up on the docket will be HLOOKUP. It's going to be a different file for you to open up online, so I'll be back with you shortly.